On what was supposed to be her wedding day, she stood alone in a courthouse hallway, still wearing white, staring at a stranger who held out his hand and said, "If you need a husband today, I need a wife." His suit was worn. His shoes were scuffed. And the look in his eyes was nothing she expected. Before we go any further, if you believe in the quiet power of kindness and second chances, make sure you're subscribed to Kindness Teles. Like this video and share your thoughts in the comments, because stories like this remind us that sometimes the worst day of your life can become the beginning of something extraordinary. 3 hours earlier, Emily Carter had been sitting in a bridal suite in a small hotel just outside Columbus, Ohio, staring at her phone. Her hands were trembling so badly that her maid of honor had to take the coffee cup away before she spilled it on her dress. The message on her screen was short. Cold. I can't do this. I'm sorry. At first she thought it was a cruel joke. Her fiancé, Daniel, had always been dramatic. But when her calls went straight to voicemail and his best man stopped answering too, the truth began to sink in. By the time his mother knocked on the door with tears in her eyes, whispering that Daniel had left town at dawn, Emily felt something inside her chest collapse. The wedding guests were already arriving at the lakeside venue. Flowers were set. Music was ready. Months of planning and 5 years of love seemed to vanish in a single text message. Humiliation burned hotter than grief. She could almost hear the whispers. Poor Emily. Left at the altar. Again. What most people didn't know was that Daniel wasn't the first man to walk away. In college, her first serious boyfriend had ended things the week she was supposed to meet his parents. She had laughed it off back then, pretending it didn't matter. But this time, at 32, it felt like confirmation of a secret fear she'd carried for years, that she simply wasn't enough. After the guests were dismissed and her dress hung uselessly in a garment bag, Emily refused to go home. Home meant neighbors. Questions. Pity. Instead, she asked her older brother to drive her downtown. She didn't fully know why. She just needed to be somewhere that didn't hold memories of broken promises. He dropped her near the Franklin County Courthouse and asked gently what she planned to do. She forced a smile and said she just needed air. He hesitated, then hugged her tight and left. The courthouse steps were busy with couples getting marriage licenses, lawyers rushing in and out, and families arguing over parking meters. Emily sat on the cold stone bench, her white dress hidden under a long gray coat, and watched strangers begin their futures while hers felt like it had just ended. That was when she overheard an argument nearby. A young woman in a blue dress was crying, telling a tall man that her visa had been denied again. She kept repeating that without a legal marriage, she would have to leave the country in 30 days. The man, clearly frustrated, kept saying he had tried everything. Eventually she stormed off, leaving him standing alone with a folder of paperwork. He didn't chase her. Instead, he sank down on the same bench, 2 seats away from Emily, and rubbed his face with both hands. Up close, she noticed his clothes were clean but worn, his jacket slightly too big, as if bought second-hand. There was something steady about him, though. Not desperate. Just tired. After a long silence, he glanced at her and said softly, "Rough day?" She almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. She pulled her coat tighter and replied, "You could say that." He noticed the edge of her white dress peeking out. His eyes widened slightly. "You too?" She nodded, and for the first time since morning, she felt a strange flicker of connection. 2 strangers on courthouse steps, both abandoned in different ways. He introduced himself as Marcus Hale. His voice was calm, measured. He explained that he had agreed to help a close friend who needed a legal spouse to stay in the country. It was supposed to be a practical arrangement. Nothing romantic. But she had panicked at the last minute. "I don't blame her," he said quietly. "Marriage isn't something you rush into." Emily stared at the courthouse doors, watching couples walk through them hand in hand. "Apparently it is," she murmured. They talked for nearly an hour. She told him about the text message. He told her about growing up in foster care, aging out at 18 with 2 trash bags of belongings and no family to call his own. He worked construction now, he said. Nothing glamorous. Just enough to cover rent in a small apartment on the east side. There was no self-pity in his tone. Just honesty. At some point, the courthouse clerk stepped outside and announced that the office would close in 30 minutes. A few couples hurried inside. Marcus looked at the doors, then back at Emily. I know this sounds crazy, he said carefully, but if you need today to mean something different than what it does right now, and I need to help someone I care about, maybe we can help each other. She turned to him slowly. Are you proposing to a stranger? I'm proposing a partnership, he replied. We'd set clear boundaries. We help each other for a year. No pressure. If at the end of it we both want out, we walk away. No harm done. It was absurd. It was impulsive. It was everything she had never imagined. And yet the idea of going home as the woman who had been left at the altar felt unbearable. The idea of rewriting the narrative, even in the smallest way, felt like oxygen. Why would you trust me? She asked. He gave a small, almost shy smile. Because you're still wearing the dress. She looked down at the white fabric hidden under gray wool. He continued, anyone who can sit here after what you've been through and still not tear it off in anger, that tells me something. Something shifted inside her then. Not love. Not even hope. Just a quiet sense that maybe this moment didn't have to define her as abandoned. 30 minutes later, they stood before a county judge who looked mildly confused but not entirely surprised. The paperwork was signed. Rings were improvised from simple silver bands purchased at a kiosk in the lobby. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Emily felt a strange calm settle over her. No guests. No flowers. No music. Just 2 people choosing not to let the day end in humiliation. They agreed to move into a modest 2-bedroom apartment near German Village, splitting expenses. The first few weeks were awkward but respectful. Marcus slept in the 2nd bedroom. They created rules, no bringing dates home, complete transparency about finances, and a promise to treat each other with kindness above all else. What Emily didn't expect was how naturally kindness began to weave itself into their daily life. Marcus woke early every morning to make coffee before she left for her job at a non-profit literacy center. He fixed the squeaky cabinet doors without being asked. When she had nightmares about her failed wedding, he would quietly leave a glass of water outside her door. In return, she packed him lunches when he forgot. She ironed his work shirts. She listened when he talked about the kids he sometimes mentored at a community center on weekends, teenagers who reminded him of himself at 16. Months passed. The initial shock of their arrangement faded into something steady and warm. One evening, about 6 months into their marriage, Emily came home early and found 2 men in expensive suits sitting at their small kitchen table. Marcus stood by the window, looking uncomfortable. She froze in the doorway. One of the men stood and extended his hand. He introduced himself as a financial advisor from New York. The other was a corporate attorney. They spoke in polished tones that felt wildly out of place in their modest apartment. Emily looked at Marcus, confusion written all over her face. After the men left, Marcus sat down heavily. He took a long breath and told her the truth he had never shared. He hadn't lied about foster care. He hadn't lied about construction work. But there was more. A man who had once been his caseworker had quietly invested a small trust in Marcus's name when he turned 18. Over the years, through careful management and a few unexpected tech investments, that modest trust had grown into something enormous. Marcus had found out only recently, when the investment firm finally tracked him down after years of searching. The account was now worth millions. I didn't know how to tell you, he admitted. I didn't want you to think this was some kind of test. Emily stared at him, stunned. The man who had been fixing cabinet doors and packing his own tools every morning was suddenly wealthy beyond imagination. Why are you still working construction? she whispered. He shrugged. Because it's honest. And because I didn't want money to change who I am. Tears welled in her eyes, not because of the money, but because of the humility in his voice. She thought about Daniel's obsession with status, the pressure to book the perfect venue, the arguments over guest lists designed to impress investors. Marcus had never tried to impress anyone. Over the next few weeks, their life didn't transform into luxury. Instead, Marcus made a decision that surprised even his advisors. He created a foundation focused on supporting teenagers aging out of foster care. Scholarships. Housing assistance. Mentorship programs. Emily helped him design literacy workshops within the program, using her nonprofit experience. They spent evenings reviewing applications, reading letters from young people who just needed someone to believe in them. One night, as they sat on their worn couch surrounded by paperwork, Marcus looked at her and said quietly, "I married you because I needed help. But somewhere along the way, you became home." Her heart pounded. This was not part of the agreement. She reached for his hand and realized that the man she had married out of desperation had become the safest place she had ever known. Their one-year arrangement came and went without either of them mentioning an end date. Instead, they planned a second wedding. This time in a small community park. No grand displays. Just close friends, a few of the teenagers from the foundation, and Emily's family. She wore a simple cream dress. Marcus wore the same slightly oversized jacket, though now tailored to fit. As they exchanged vows, she realized something profound. The day she thought had ruined her life had actually redirected it. If Daniel hadn't sent that text. If she hadn't refused to go home. If she hadn't sat on those courthouse steps in her white dress. She would never have met the man who understood that love wasn't about spectacle. It was about showing up. Quietly. Consistently. Today, their foundation supports hundreds of young adults across Ohio. The construction company Marcus still works with now partners on building affordable housing units funded by the trust. Emily continues her literacy work, expanding programs into underserved neighborhoods. They never set out to build a life together. It grew from an act of mutual compassion between two people on the worst day of their lives. And that's the beautiful truth about kindness. Sometimes it doesn't look grand or planned. Sometimes it looks like sitting beside a stranger who is hurting just as much as you are. Sometimes it looks like saying yes to something uncertain because you refuse to let bitterness win. If there's one thing this story reminds us, it's that rejection isn't always an ending. It can be a redirection towards something deeper than you imagined. The world can change in a single conversation on a courthouse bench. So if you ever find yourself on what feels like the worst day of your life, choose kindness anyway. Choose openness. You never know who might be sitting beside you. And if you've ever experienced a moment where kindness changed your path in an unexpected way, share it in the comments. Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs to keep believing that even broken days can lead to beautiful beginnings.